Hello everyone, Rob Guest from football.london here, and welcome to the latest episode of Gold Guest Talk Tottenham, sponsored by NordVPN. Joining me as ever, it's Alasdair Gold. Ali, you well?
I am. Hope you are too. Yes, we've got transfer news to talk about. Hurrah! An actual getting close to the ceiling of transfer news as well, which is fantastic. We did say that July the 1st stuff would start kind of kicking on, and there we go, straight off the bat. Although we should stress, as it is the world of Tottenham Hotspur, we are recording this when the deal for Archie Gray has not entirely gone through yet. So, as Brentford found, this could all go horribly wrong late on in the process, but hopefully not. And everything we say in this podcast will absolutely be the case as of tomorrow.
Yeah, there's been quite a few deals already today on Monday, July the 1st. Spurs are closing in on a deal for Archie Gray from Leeds United. Looks to be for a fee around 25 to 30 million. And then there's Joe Rodon. He's heading back to Ellen Road on a permanent basis this time. He had a really successful loan spell in West Yorkshire last season. Obviously enjoyed it that much. He wants to be back there playing his football on a full-time basis. So I'm sure Leeds will be, gutted to be losing Archie Gray, but at the same time, pleased that they're getting Joe Rodon back. For Spurs, Archie Gray is going to be a fantastic piece of business because he is some player.
Absolutely. Honestly, I do also feel for Brentford. How many transfers have they had, like these big ones that keep kind of falling away at the last minute? I mean, you were telling me earlier, there's a fair few now, isn't it?
Yeah, Noosa, who was linked with Spurs in January. There was Mikhailo Mudryk as well. I think Brentford were looking to sign him in the transfer window before he went to Chelsea. That never came to fruition. I think there was another one as well. It might be Bakayoko,
Right.
which didn't go through. So they're having a bit of rotten luck in terms of getting transfers over the line. Quite clearly, looking at signing these talented players, but just can't get it done in the end. But it's one of these that is just going to profit Tottenham now, with Archie Gray closing in on the move to the club.
Absolutely. I mean, Archie Gray was all set to go to Brentford. That was his choice. Very happy with that. And, I put it out there in kind of social media on the day that would have been a place he would have got a lot of regular football. Very similar to the Noosa kind of choice back then as well. He and his representatives felt that's the one. That's the one where he's going to develop quickly because of the amount of game time he would have got at Brentford. But they just couldn't agree the structure of the payments. So what was set to be his choice, and that was the thing. There was loads of top clubs were kind of watching it and thinking, okay, well, he's chosen Brentford. That's that. And then suddenly it all collapses with Brentford quite spectacularly as well, in a way, just to be able to not get that structure right. And Spurs sense the opportunity. And, we reported weeks back that Gray was on their radar, as he was for most clubs, to be fair, but also one that they really felt would not only be a terrific player for the future, but in the Postecoglou system, which we'll speak about, he really could fit in like an absolute glove, or it fits him like a glove. Is probably the best way to say it. As soon as that sudden window of opportunity arose, Spurs were in there like a shot, and quite quickly agreed with the players' camp by the sounds of it, and then it was just a case of doing a deal with Leeds, which obviously, when you've got someone like Joe Rodon in your back pocket, I'm sure Joe Rodon doesn't want to be in anyone's back pocket, but it's a player that Leeds loved and that Leeds were desperate to get back. And we'll talk about more about the Rodon side of it, but fair play to him as well for having Premier League clubs interested in him. In Ipswich and Leicester were the two that were most keen of the Premier League clubs. Leicester, I understand, had a bid of around £10 million rejected by Spurs. And his preferred destination was to go back to Leeds in the Championship. I suppose you look at it and you say maybe Ipswich may bounce back down. Maybe, we don't know. And then you don't know then what happens with McKenna, who was a big fan of Rodon. But then also, I suppose, with Leicester, there's this likely points deduction as well. So they could end up quite quickly being Championship clubs again. So maybe he feels like, long term at a club that he absolutely loved being at, maybe that was his thinking. But yeah, back to Spurs, having Rodon in his back pocket and saying, okay, well, we want your player, you want ours. Surely we can get a deal done here. And it looks like it's been an easier process. There's some claims from the Leeds side of things, the reporters around Leeds, that there's some kind of clause involved as well. Haven't been able to confirm that. That seems to be kind of news to a lot of people around the Spurs end of things. That's not to say it doesn't exist, but what I wonder, and we were talking about this just before we started recording, that maybe Brentford met this clause, if there is one, financially, because obviously their part of the deal was going to be more towards 35 million upwards, reaching 40, whereas Spurs are going to be more around the 25 going up to 30, and then Rodon. Maybe Spurs have technically replicated roughly what the clause would have wanted, and Leeds have been amenable to that. So maybe from the Spurs side, it isn't quite operating within a clause. It's kind of mimicking it, if you know what I mean. That could be, I could be wrong, but just certainly I haven't heard anything on the Spurs side of things about a clause. And also, I'm surprised if a clause would involve a player going the other way. It would seem not to fit, for me, most ideas of clauses that I've seen. But yeah, at the end of the day, regardless of all of that, it could be a terrific deal for Spurs going forward. I mean, you think about it, it's likely to be announced today, you'd imagine. Although with Spurs, you never know. Sometimes they do draw it out to the next morning. But on the same day, I wonder if we look back on July the 1st, 2024, as the day that Archie Gray and Lucas Bergvall both signed on the same day, as like a bit of a, I don't know, like could it be, I'm massively speculating here, but if they were to reach the potential they have, maybe you look back on this day and I think it's something like a Via Ardiles day, like a double signing day that was like a wow. It could go the other way. They could end up, I hope it's not, but it could end up like a Jack Clark situation. Although I would say the finances involved in this are far away kind of from the Jack Clark deal. This is not by any means a kind of a cheaper scenario. But yeah, I mean, you and I both have watched bits and pieces of him over the season because we've been keeping an eye on what Joe Rodon's been up to as well. What do you think of him as a player, Archie Gray?
I think he's fantastic. And best thing is, he's 18 years old. He's only gone to get better. And Archie Gray was in the Leeds squad, in the matchday squad against Arsenal as a 15-year-old. I think this was December 21. And he was in there a few more times. Wasn't put on, but that just shows you, the talent he's got to even be considered to be part of the matchday squad as a 15-year-old is incredible. And yeah, even Jesse Marsh said, I think it was the season after that, he already considered Archie Gray as a first-team player at 16. Didn't quite play under Jesse Marsh. It was from last season onwards where he got a go under Daniel Farke in the Leeds team, and yeah, handed his debut against Cardiff City and just didn't look back. 52 appearances in all. Started the season in midfield, which is his natural role, but ended up playing as a right back. I've read that Daniel Farke said that Gray actually played as a right back in Leeds' academy at times, so he's certainly no stranger to the position. And he's just gone from strength to strength, just delivering, big performances. Belie his tender years, really. You just wouldn't be expecting it from a player of 18 to be, standing out in the Championship, because it's a hell of a league. Some really good players in there. But that's what he's done. I think the Leicester game for me stands out last season, where he scored, I think, about 10 minutes from time. That sparked a Leeds win when they were losing. Then there was Chelsea in the FA Cup as well, playing against Moises Caicedo and I think it was Enzo Fernandez in midfield. And you think he'd maybe get, a bit overawed by the situation, but he didn't. He came out with the Man of the Match award. So there might be a few Tottenham fans having, a few doubts over Archie Gray being 18, no Premier League experience. But I think what he demonstrated at Stamford Bridge that evening at the end of February, shows he can mix it in the Premier League. So I think it's a really, really good signing for Tottenham.
Absolutely. I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there. I've seen a couple of kind of, suggestions along those lines of like, why are we spending so much money on a kid kind of thing? We need someone for the now. I would think he will take to Premier League football quite quickly. I mean, like you said, he's already shown against Premier League teams that he's absolutely fine. But mostly the fact that if you play 52 games in the Championship over a season, or Championship and all competitions last season, that's more than a normal 18-year-old. That's not someone that is, with no disrespect to Spurs Academy players, because they've got some terrific young players in the academy, but that is very different to plucking an 18-year-old out of Spurs Academy and saying, right, get out there and play. The Championship is a tough, physical, demanding league. That was a long season for Leeds, and he was right slap bang in the middle of it as a key player. I'm hoping he doesn't mind me saying this, but I've just kind of having a bit of a back and forth with our Leeds correspondent across the company, and he was just saying, you've got some player coming. He's an unbelievable talent. So sad we're not going to see him anymore. And that kind of will sum up the feeling among Leeds. I think a lot of Leeds fans were kind of had expected that he wasn't going to go. They were going to find other players to head out the door to ease their issues, because apparently they were okay for last year's books for the PSR stuff, but it was more the fact that they've got a reported 190 million in unpaid transfer fees. They're like the different installments they've got, so they just have to get money into the club. So yeah, they're just absolutely gutted, I think, that he's going. But there you go. It's a great deal for them getting Joe Rodon. I do think that. I think they've got a player who, like we said, could have been a Premier League player as well. So it's kind of worked out for them in a way. They've got a player that they all loved last season, and Spurs have got a player who, I won't lie, I've watched a compilation video earlier. Like we said, we've watched a fair chunk of him because we've been watching the league's game for our loan roundups on Joe. But I watched a compilation video. It was set to some kind of indie type music, and that's not the important bit. The important bit was he just has got this fearlessness on the ball, the technique on the ball, tactical intelligence for an 18-year-old as well. He's just made for Postecoglou ball, Ange ball, whatever you want to call it. He will not be scared when a player is pressing him. He will be able to pass around him or dribble around him without even thinking twice about it. I hate to throw this name in there, but it's more the fearlessness I'm talking about. We watch someone like Jude Bellingham and we see the fearlessness and almost a touch of arrogance, I guess, about him as well. And you look at someone like Archie Gray, and he's got that fearlessness. He's got that belief in his own ability, and he's not scared of what comes next. And so the Premier League will not faze him in any way, shape, or form. And for Postecoglou, I mean, options galore because he's so versatile, really, isn't it?
He is, yeah. As we've seen, he can play it right back. And what we saw last season when Pedro Porro wasn't in the team, that was clear to see because Emerson, he just doesn't, have that natural ability to come inside and operate on the ball. That's not his game. So it's just like tailor-made for Archie Gray if Spurs want to use him as a right back, because he will be coming inside and then he's just playing in the areas that are natural to his game, as he's, a midfielder by trade. So it's a really good signing in terms of he can cover right back if required. He can play in a variety of midfield roles. I was looking at some quotes from Jesse Marsh, and he was saying he probably views him as someone who can play as a 6, 8, or a 10. But Marsh was saying he's spoken to Archie Gray's dad. This would have been probably 2 seasons ago now, about what he viewed as his best position in the team, and he thinks he's better deeper. So maybe number 6.
Yes,
over the long
I've heard
term.
that as well. Yes, there's 3 potential roles for him, isn't there? Really?
Yeah, but I mean, he's really good on the ball, good at tackling, winning possession, can move forward with it at ease. And, just watching his performances for Leeds, you wouldn't think he was 18-year-old.
No.
The way he plays the game is so much confidence, and all his teammates have so much confidence in his ability as well. I think that's just clear to see. So Tottenham, have a star on the hands. My next door neighbour, he's a Leeds fan, and he was suggesting to me Gray maybe could have gone and played as a fullback for England at the Euros.
You look at it now, and he could have.
Yeah, because he's that good, and he has played as a left back, I think, on a couple of occasions for Leeds. But But I think if he carries on progressing the way he does and you get some regular football at Spurs, I think he'd probably be in with a shout for the England squad, the 26 World Cup.
Yeah, well, let's see. Let's see. We know what Tottenham are like. They like to give players an injury or two, and absolutely find ways to stop their progress sometimes. But yeah, definitely on paper the potential is there. And I would say there's been some suggestions that Spurs are battling with people like Brentford for him. That's not the case here. Brentford were getting in there first because of the football they were able to offer him, the guarantees over more regular football. If anything, Spurs have kind of beaten a lot of the other big clubs to this swoop. I must be honest with the amount of time it was taking yesterday, and to kind of get it towards the stage it is now, I was worried that maybe a Chelsea, Arsenal, or Liverpool were also going to come in there because all of them have been looking at him, and Spurs have been able to, not quite as much as Brentford, but been able to offer that little bit more football maybe than the others could. His versatility, like you say, he's going to be able to use across that midfield and as a right back as well. And yeah, as you said, as an inverted right back in the Postecoglou system, it was like he was genetically made for it because, you saw him use Oliver Skipp as on the left with the idea that, he's a central midfielder. A lot of the game for that fullback position, essentially suits that in the inverted sense. But Archie Gray has done both. He's naturally a central midfielder, but has played, 3/4 or so of a season as a right back. So he's going to fit it perfectly. Pre-season, of course, is going to be big for him too. Getting in there and really understanding what's asked of him. He seems to be a very fit player. There was the stat, wasn't there? He's tackled more than anyone else in the Championship, more successful tackles than anyone. So, yeah, it's a very exciting signing. I mean, we mentioned Oliver Skipp there. It doesn't seem that he's involved in this deal in any way, although Daniel Farke would have loved to have him there after a terrific season at Norwich. I get the sense that if Spurs were to allow him to leave, Oliver Skipp, it would probably be Premier League clubs would be kind of queuing up to take him. And they've got that massive club trained issue with him that I just still don't see how you can afford to let him go, because in the Europa League, let's say Troy Parrott goes, AZ Alkmaar looking at him, probably the most serious contender to get him. You're left with 3 senior club trained players, and that would be Skippy, Whiteman, and Austin, the 2 goalkeepers. You can't, unless you're going to try to fill those with the B list players who are already registered anyway. I don't see how you can let Skippy go. And he could play a fair few of the Europa League games and domestic cup matches. It's not ideal. He's not going to be playing the amount of games that he would want to go away and play next season. But I can understand a kind of a reluctance to let him go. But yeah, back to Archie Gray. Very exciting signing. And I think people need to look at this less as a Jack Clark signing, who was £10 million, was kind of the cheaper alternative to the slightly older Jared Bowen at that time. See this more as, I guess, finance-wise, it doesn't really compare, but maybe a bit of a Dele type, a Dele Alli type, that there's a real feeling can hit his strides very quickly in the top flight. I think that's probably the best way to look at it. Obviously, he was playing at a higher level than Dele. Dele was League One, wasn't he, with MK Dons at that point? I'm not going to throw the Bellingham one in there again. We'll maybe mention him again in a couple of years' time. But I think Dele is probably a good example, and hopefully he adapts as quickly, because Dele was within that team, starting very, very quickly. And like I say, who knows? Pre-season, Postecoglou could just be absolutely blown away by what he does. But it's a very exciting signing and a great way to kind of kick off. I know it's technically not kicking off because we've got Timo Werner was signed, but in terms of a permanent signing, him and Bergvall on the same day, it's very exciting 1-2 there of 18-year-olds that could potentially be the future of Spurs midfield for years to come.
There's someone else at Leeds Spurs might want to look at signing, and that's Archie Gray's brother. As apparently Archie Gray has said his brother is better than him.
I've heard a few people told me that in the last couple of days. He's only 15, isn't he?
Something like that.
Is it Harry?
I think it's Harry. So he must be some player if he's better than Archie Gray.
I wonder. Isn't he? He's a striker, isn't he? I think
so.
I feel like someone told me that. So Yeah, hey, maybe if Spurs are playing the long game, is it 4D chess as they like to call it? Maybe they're looking at it and thinking, hey, if we can get him to convince him too, that's the future set up for in two positions. I can't imagine
Some,
he'd come cheap. Although
yeah,
15-year-old, technically, I know it's naughty, but you can. There's probably easier ways to get academy kind of youngsters away. As unpleasant as that whole business is when it comes to academy stuff.
yeah. Some family though, the Gray family and
Oh,
Leeds United, so
that
much
DNA.
history with the club. Yeah,
Yeah. Sporting superstars, aren't they, really?
yeah, definitely. Just going back to Joe Rodon then,
Yeah.
you mentioned Ipswich and Leicester keen on him. I think Leicester that would have been probably an attractive proposition with Steve Cooper now at the
Yep.
helm, someone Joe worked under Swansea City prior to his move to Spurs. But I think it's one of these. He was that happy and settled at Leeds, playing week in, week out. The fans have taken to him. Even though Leeds are in the Championship, Ipswich and Leicester can now offer Premier League football. It's just one he's comfortable with. So it probably makes sense because you've seen players move before elsewhere, maybe to, a better standard of football. And that move's just not worked out for them. And then within a year, they're on the move elsewhere. So I think it's one what probably just suits all parties.
Yeah, I mean, there was a little worry of mine that, I get the impression that Archie and Joe Rodon got on very well at Leeds as well. There's a little kind of a worry, like, oh, whatever he says to him, why are you going there? They never really gave me a chance, but it obviously doesn't seem to have been the case in the end. Yeah, I do feel for Joe Rodon. I do feel like he came at just the worst time to Spurs. There's such a chopping and changing of managers. He was just almost caught in between the cracks, like the guy that fell down the back of the sofa in a way that so many different managers. Probably Mourinho was the one who
Yeah.
gave him more of a chance than anyone else. And just Postecoglou, I remember being out last summer in the pre-season, and you could just see Joe was training with we called them, I know it's the wrong way to say it, but it was kind of true, the bomb squad. It was the kind of players we knew were not going to be at the squad, and he was training with them, and he was sometimes involved with the main team, but mostly when they were doing like training matches, he would be there. Certainly the open training matches, and you kind of felt like, I don't know, maybe he just didn't feel like being able to pass out the back quickly was part of his game. I don't know, but he obviously went away and had such a brilliant season with Leeds, and the fans love him. And I do think that probably from Leeds' perspective, it's quite clever in that you're losing one of your big stars in the making, but you are bringing in a player that they loved. The Leeds fans, they really got a connection with Joe Rodon, and he formed quite a connection with a lot of those players as well. So yeah, I mean, certainly think Ipswich and Leicester made a lot of kind of attempts and to kind of woo him, um, and kind of get their case across to Spurs. I just wonder whether, yeah, it was the fact that both of them could have come down quite quickly, and those points issues. I mean, we don't. It's been some talk; it could be anything up to 15 points, isn't it, for Leicester? It's like talk anywhere between 6 and 15 points. So, yeah, I think Leeds is probably a good move for him. It gives him another year, and if they do get up to Premier League, which you would expect after getting 90 points. Maybe the relegated teams coming down into that league maybe aren't quite as strong perhaps this year. It's a difficult one. I mean, Burnley lost the manager as well, didn't they? So I would imagine Leeds will come back up, and he'll be another year on. 27 years old by that point, even more ready to play in the Premier League. You just got to go where you're happy. I think that's the key thing in life. And yeah, no, you can only wish him the best. I do still feel that maybe he wasn't given the full chance at Spurs, but yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they're getting this deal done because he is on this training camp out in Santa Barbara in California. And how do you? I suppose you can nowadays you can do stuff remotely. Although I don't know, I should probably have a look what the time is right now in California. I'd imagine it's probably still the middle of the night.
I think they're probably 8 hours behind. I think it's usually the case. Maybe coming up to 6 a.m. over there.
Yeah, could Could well be. I can tell you right now because I'm Googling it. Oh, no, it's 5:45 a.m. as we record this. So, yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's a good move for him. I think it is. And I hope he goes on to have a very good career. Interestingly, he's kind of retained his value, hasn't he? Despite the fact, I mean, what did Spurs sign him for way
It's
back?
about 16.
Yeah, it was roughly what I think all in. I'd imagine it's between 10 and 15 they're going to get for him as part of this deal. If they rejected a £10 million offer from Ipswich. And then bearing in mind he's in the last year of his contract as well. I think he has kind of retained his value. It shows how important. I know sometimes we get frustrated, and so do fans, when like a player you expect to leave on a permanent transfer is given a loan. And you kind of think, oh, why have you done that? It's kind of hanging around, and there's that phrase deadwood used and all this sort of stuff. But actually, sometimes, like with Rodon, they can go away and absolutely smash it, and it retains their value, and it allows you to get more for them the next summer than you would have the previous summer. I think Reguilon could end up being another case of that. Having a good season at Brentford kind of reminded a half season, and obviously got Man U on his CV now, will remind people, okay, he's actually pretty decent too. But yeah, good move for Joe, and we can only wish him the best. Whether that gets done today, I don't know how that works. Whether they can do it quickly, like get up, wake up, go to this medical facility in Santa Barbara, do the medical. I don't know. It seems like they're going to be announced as separate deals regardless, but obviously we can kind of see it as a bit of an overall package.
Yeah, I'll always go back to Jose Mourinho being sacked as a reason, probably why we maybe not seen as much as Joe in the Tottenham shirt as maybe should have done, because there was that 4-game period before Jose was sacked when he was starting. And I remember the game at Newcastle, I think it was partnered alongside Davinson Sanchez, and Joe Rodon looked like the more experienced centre-back there, despite only joining from Swansea a few months earlier. And even when like Nuno came in, or when Ryan Mason was in interim charge, he just went back to being Toby Alderweireld and Sanchez.
He went for the safe option, didn't he? I think. Yeah.
I think what he knew, and under Nuno, it just didn't quite work out. And the same for Antonio Conte. I think, what did he play? Maybe a couple of times under Conte. I can remember him coming on. Was it late on against Arsenal in the derby? What just felt like a bit of a token appearance. Like, you've trained really well with us over the year. You've not played so much, but we'll give you a bit of game time here. But yeah, fair play to him. Leeds is a good move for him, and fingers crossed they'll be back in the Premier League.
Yeah.
Right. I think we're halfway through the pod. So, Ali, do you want to talk about the benefits of using NordVPN?
Of course. I don't know whether Joe Rodon is using NordVPN out there in Santa Barbara to be able to watch the shows that he would watch back home in Wales or Leeds or Tottenham area. But we know that certainly NordVPN is the fastest VPN in the world, and that means there's no buffering, no lagging, and you can stream your favorite shows from anywhere in the world without your bandwidth throttling. And now there is also Saily, which is a brand new eSIM from the creators of NordVPN. And eSIM provides an internet connection wherever you travel. It saves you money on roaming fees and stops you having to use sometimes dodgy public Wi-Fi. So yeah, a very good setup, which I haven't used yet, but I am going to hopefully use over the course of this summer when I'm away with Spurs to their various locales they're going to. But yeah, that certainly sounds a good way to save on those roaming fees, absolutely. So if you want to get a really good deal on that, if you go to nordvpn.com/gold guest, not only does our link give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan, but you'll also receive a Saily data voucher. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. And in case you missed it just then, the link is in the podcast episode description box.
Right, as we're now on Monday, July the 1st, it is basically the start of the 24-25 Premier League season. So yesterday, Sunday, June the 30th, I think 9 players bid farewell to the football club. One of those, Ryan Sessegnon. Ryan Sessegnon is now actually training with Crystal Palace ahead of the season. That Oliver Glasner probably remembers him from his time working in Germany when Sessegnon was playing for Hoffenheim. And this could be a really good move for Ryan if it all does come to fruition.
Yeah, I think it's a lovely move for him to kind of step into if that's the one that happens. Yeah, definitely training with them right now, and talks taking place over a potential deal for him. Obviously, it's not tied up yet, as we've seen in the last 48 hours. It doesn't quite always turn out how you hope, but fingers crossed, everyone's hoping that deal gets done. I think he'd be in the kind of rotation competition for that left back spot there. Yeah, it could be a perfect move for him to kind of step into. I know some people might say, well, why did Spurs let him go if he was able to step into a club like Palace that quickly? But I just think it was the right time for all parties to have that fresh start. And you could argue that what Spurs saved in wages in not taking on that extra year and things like that, I would imagine that clubs would have been less likely to take the risk of putting a fee forward for him this summer. Whereas as a free agent, it's a much far less of a gamble to take him on. But fingers crossed he's back to where he can be, because he's had these 2 operations now, one on each leg. He's been at his own training camp this summer, trying to get this fitness and readiness for a Premier League season. But ultimately, we won't really know till he gets up and running and is in competitive matches where he's getting kicked and whacked and twisting and turning and all this sort of stuff. But really, fingers crossed, because I hate to use the analogy now because of what's happened since, but the way we were with Ryan Sessegnon in 2019, it's kind of where we are with Archie Gray now. He was the breakout, exciting young player in the Championship, the one that everyone said was going to become a bit of a star, a bit of a generational talent in a way. I mean, he'd been doing it since he was 16 as well at Fulham. And yeah, obviously injuries that's why I kind of always so cautious about young players, in that we can talk about their potential, but we probably can't talk about what they're going to do in the future other than kind of dream a little bit, because sometimes it's not even about hard work, because you get someone like Ryan Sessegnon that's just been so unfortunate. He's still only 24, which is just mad. I think he only turned 24 like last couple of months as well. So it's not even like he's, going to be 25 soon or mid-20s or anything like that. He's still so young because he came through so early. And my hope, and I think I've said this before, certainly written it, is that because he's missed this fair chunk of football in the last couple of years, maybe his body isn't going to be as battered as it would have been had he played consistently from 16 onwards. So maybe his career is not going to be as, I don't know, early conclusion to it or anything like that. I really hope now that he can get going and get everything back on track. And I think Palace could end up, if he has, if he shows just even half of the potential that he's had over the years, they could end up being one of the bargains of the summer.
Yeah, it just does feel like he's been around forever now. And it just seems a bit mad that he's saying like he's only just turned 24, but it was 2016-17 season where he burst onto the scene at Fulham, scoring goals for fun, played key part in their promotion push the following season. And yeah, unfortunately, it's just not worked out for him. But if it is to be Palace, good move for him, possibly a really good move for Palace as well. Right. There's been some more news regarding Spurs today, and it involves a new training wear sponsor, BetMGM, Tottenham's new training kit sponsor. They take over from Getir. I think it's reportedly worth around 10 million a season.
So,
quite a lucrative deal for the club. So we've seen the new training wear as well. What do you make of it?
Quite like it, to be honest.
Yeah.
We can all have our kind of say and thoughts on having a betting company on the shirt. That's definitely a whole other subject. And as someone that's had certainly within my kind of extended family some issues with betting and stuff like that, it's not something that's particularly close to my heart. However, they did this, they voted, didn't they? That I think it's from the 25-26 season that you can't have betting companies on your main match shirts.
Right.
However, you will still be able to use them on training wear, advertising, hoarding around grounds, things like that as well. So it's not out of the bounds as it was. But in terms of the actual shirts, this is our first glance today. Really like the main one, the training one that they're going to mostly wear. I'll often get myself a training top when I play five-a-side rather than an actual like match kit. And yeah, it's definitely kind of tickled my fancy, that, and especially as you don't actually have the betting, that won't be on the shirts you buy this season. They're not going to have the training wear sponsors aren't going to be on it, or the shirt sleeve sponsors that you'd imagine Spurs will get sorted before the season starts. The warm-up shirt that they've got Basuma wearing, a little bit like a soccer aid top that
Right.
the rest of the world, I think, were wearing. It's kind of got. I have only seen that kind of. It's slightly blocked image, although I think it is on the club website now to buy and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, it kind of gave me soccer aid vibes, but yeah, all very good. And ultimately, if you can separate the fact that it's a betting company, I know some people won't like that at all. And I've certainly seen that reaction on social media already. But I guess in terms of sponsorship, 10 million a year coming into the club, that all heads towards everything it can head towards, transfers and the like. It's 2 million up on Getir by the sounds of it a year. And we don't know what's happened with Getir, and the Sky reported, didn't they, that it was still 5 million they owed, I think it was, to Spurs. We don't know kind of what the latest is on that yet. There doesn't seem to have been any comment on that. But more sponsorship, the easier it is for Spurs to work within the profit and sustainability rules as well. That all kind of counts towards that 3-year deal. And then we'll see where we are in 3 years and what state they're in. They're part of a bigger company, which is called, I've got it here somewhere, Leo Vegas Group. BetMGM.
I think they've sponsored Norwich before on the front of the shirt.
Yeah, well, BetMGM is certainly with Newcastle and Wolves. They've done little deals, smaller deals this season, I think. I feel like they were in Man City as well. But they've kind of become quite prominent in the last year or so. I think Chris Rock does the campaign, doesn't it, on the telly? I think you see him. So they've kind of become this bigger thing. But yeah, Spurs did announce quite early on that they shirts won't be sold with the logo on it, which is an interesting one. I wonder whether that is purely because they knew it was going to be released before the sponsor was officially announced, or whether it's the side of maybe selling something that's got a betting company name on it, if young children. I don't know how that works, really. Maybe that's more the idea of it. But yeah, either way, it's money coming into the club that hopefully can go on the likes of transfers, and they can build on this signing of Archie Gray.
Yeah, and the players will be back wearing those training shirts this weekend, Saturday, July the 6th. Players due to start filtering back to Hotspur Way. So there could be likes of Lucas Bergvall there, and a number of those who weren't involved in the international football, such as James Maddison as well. And there's got to be a couple of new coaching staff there who we've not talked about on the podcast yet, because it happened, I think, the evening of the podcast that we filmed last week. So it's Nick Montgomery and Sergio Raimundo coming in as Ange Postecoglou's assistant coaches. Montgomery and Raimundo know each other really well. They've, formed a partnership over the past few years. They worked together at Central Coast Mariners and Hibernian last year when Montgomery was appointed as head coach. So going to be quite interesting, this, in terms of you've got a manager and assistant manager now coming in as working as assistant coaches in this coaching setup.
Yeah, I'd love people to tell us in the comments, if you're watching this on YouTube, or tweet us if you're listening to the podcast. Has that happened elsewhere? I was trying to wrap my brains of thinking of, has a manager and his assistant come into, at the same time, a coaching setup under a different manager? And not even as an assistant manager. Matt Wells has got the promotion to do that. So it's a very interesting dynamic. You would assume that Postecoglou is very comfortable with the fact that he's not going to try and take over the show or anything, Nick Montgomery. But yeah, I just found that a fascinating one. Certainly seems to be quite a high kind of belief in the two of them as coaches, because this is the thing you've got to separate. Yes, he went to Hibernian, didn't work out for them. Everyone I've spoken to around Hibernian have kind of said a tough time to go in there as a manager. bit of upheaval, a lot of managers in the last couple of years. Sounds familiar. And yeah, recruitment apparently didn't maybe get in the kind of players he needed for the way he plays. Sounds a bit similar to Postecoglou in terms of possession football, attacking football, all this sort of stuff. So maybe slightly hard done by, especially what they've done with Central Coast Mariners, taking them as a bit of an unfancied team to the A-League title. So yeah, as coaches, I don't think you can doubt them. Both kind of got a bit of a military background, which is quite interesting. Raimundo was in the I'm trying to remember which one it was. Certainly was in the armed forces for about 3 years, I think it was. And Montgomery, I think his dad maybe was in the army. They've got a bit of a kinship in that. They met on a UEFA, I think it was an A license course in Belfast together. And they're both very, very disciplined, and also kind of good with players. So yeah, nobody's going to get away with anything. Let's put it that way. And the other good thing about Raimundo is he speaks 6 different languages. So everyone is going to be very well communicated with. And that's one of the key things about the Postecoglou way is the communication and getting that out there. And that's one of the reasons I think Matt Wells has been given the promotion is that everyone raves about his training sessions and how good he is at getting information across to players in such a short space of time in such a clear way. So I think Postecoglou probably sees a little bit of himself in Matt Wells in that regard. So yeah, it's a big call there. And you've still got Mile Jedinak there, who I think he and Montgomery were both looked at as potential Melbourne Victory new managers over the last couple of months or so, or last month. And neither, I think Montgomery maybe took himself out of the running, and maybe Mile Jedinak, I don't know whether he did the same or didn't get the job, but certainly it seems like he's assembling, and I think this is the Postecoglou way, a coaching staff of coaches who can all go on and be managers, or want to probably go on and be managers. Matty Wells has made no secret of that. We know Ryan Mason wants to become a manager. I know some people are a bit like, oh, is Ryan Mason's nose going to be put out of joint by not being assistant? I wouldn't have thought so. I mean, this is only my assumption of the case of it all, but he is younger than Matt Wells. Matt Wells has been an assistant manager 3 times now in his career, to Scott Parker twice at Bournemouth and Club Brugge, and also to Mason when Mason had his second caretaker stint. So I think as an assistant manager, Matt Wells is far more qualified. So I can understand that logic behind it all. And with Ryan Mason, his chance may arise in the next year or so. But I think he's just turned 33, maybe. I think he had his birthday recently. I think Matt Wells is 35. I think at this stage, any coach is going to have concerns about that first move into management. You've got to pick the right one. Otherwise, you can bury your entire management career. We've seen, his name's gone out my head. Who was Nuno's assistant manager?
Oh, God.
Ian.
I can't remember. I know who you mean.
Nuno, assistant manager. Sorry, I'm going to have to look it up now. Otherwise, we're doing him a massive disservice, as he was at Spurs. Was it Cathro? Oh, what was his name?
It might have been Cathro.
Ian Cathro. There you go. Got it. Yeah, Ian Cathro. He was it Hearts? I think he was at Hearts as manager. Didn't work out for him. And now, maybe he doesn't get to be a manager again. It's such a big thing, even when they're young, and you just hope an opportunity re-arises for you. So yeah, Chris Davies obviously has gone to Birmingham. That's a big first job to take, because the expectation there, he's got to hit the ground running. He's got to get promotion, and he's 39, so he's older than the likes of Wells and Mason. So yeah, but ultimately, as I said, Postecoglou loves his coaches to go on and be managers. He doesn't get attached to any coach, doesn't take them on to another job. That's not really the way he works. He is there to develop players and develop coaches and turn them into managers if that's what they wish and hope for. So so you've got all of them. You've got Rob Birch, the goalkeeping coach as well, who's seems to be doing good stuff at the club too. So yeah, plenty of coaching talent now in that setup, and lots of different kind of experience as well, different levels, different countries. Definitely Nick Montgomery is going to bring that. I mean, he's quite an experienced kind of player in the day as well, wasn't he? Sheffield United played a lot of games for. And intrigued to see how they divvy up the free kicks and stuff like that now, and set pieces, because previously it was Mile Jedinak on the defensive set pieces, Ryan Mason on the attacking ones. Will they continue to do that, or will they, as just a bit of a freshening up, give that to some of the other coaches now? I'm fascinated to see which way round that all works. I know I can hear fans out there right now saying defensive set pieces to anyone else kind of thing, but he was never going to bring in a set piece specialist. That's just not his thing. He doesn't. He said that himself. Doesn't do it. But yeah, it's a very interesting blend, that coaching setup. It's bigger than last season. One extra coaching staff member now. 2 essentially have come in to replace Chris Davies' gap in the coaching setup, and maybe more to come. Who knows? It could surprise us and bring someone else in as well. But I'm looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to seeing the players that come back, because now I think we're at a stage where, on the tour, where we kind of get really good access normally in interviews, there's going to be a lot of players there. You know, we may be able to get Lucas Bergvall again. Archie Gray should be there. Vicario maybe should be back, having gone out with Italy. You would imagine that 3 weeks rest, that'll just about tie in with him maybe flying off on about the 22nd on the tour. You got Maddison will be there with his England frustration kind of thing and missing out. Sonny, of course, will be there.
I think I worked it out as the players due to return in early July. There's about 29 of them, 30 now if you're including Archie Gray, and then Pierre-Emile Højbjerg's exited the Euros this week. Guillermo Vicario had their 3 weeks on mid-July in time for the tour.
I was shocked if Højbjerg. I don't think Højbjerg are going to tour, you'd think.
But there's a lot of players to work with right from the word go.
That's got to be more than previous years, hasn't it, when there's been international tournaments?
Yeah, because, I mean, Spurs always had players going off international tournaments, didn't they? Kane, Dyer, there'll have been a few more on top of that as well. Yes, it was only 4 players going to the Euros and 3 at the Copa America. So, it should be a very, busy start to pre-season in terms of the players there. Got to be interested to see Nick Montgomery at the club, because I think you can remember him as a bit of a no-nonsense midfielder, and that's exactly what it sounds like he is in terms of his coaching.
Yeah.
No nonsense, bit of tough love, basically says it how it is. And I think it was reading something what Martin Boyle, who was a player at Hibs under him, said even those players who would go away on international duty, they'd still be sent the recordings of the training. So they'd have to watch that back. Yeah, so like they were always kept up to date with what's happening to make sure everyone's still on the same page and not missing out. So, yeah, I think it'll be a good appointment. Ange certainly knows what he can offer from his time in Australia. Brought through a number of youngsters at Central Coast Mariners. So that'll be something he'll be probably looking to do at Spurs as well. And then Sergio Raimundo, he previously said that his dream is to work as an assistant manager in the Premier League. That's now come true. So, yeah, I think 2 really interesting appointments for Tottenham.
Yeah, I think there's always the case of having to prove yourself when you go to a higher level of taking on these players where there may be a little bit more egos. It's not too bad at Spurs. That's not really something you see. But having been a coach at kind of, with no disrespect, leagues that aren't the same level as the Premier League, and maybe, or, do the players take you seriously, things like that. I guess, when you've got someone like Nick Montgomery who has played so many games for Sheffield United, and you just know they've been there, done it. It's a bit like Mile Jedinak, even though Mile Jedinak is a kind of young coach coming in there. And I guess the same with Ryan Mason is that they've kind of earned that respect because they've been in your shoes. They've been there and done that for those players. And like I say, when someone like Matty Wells, they're just such a highly rated coach anyway, you can instantly see how good the sessions are. And it's like I say, it's the blend that will be really interesting to see. It could either be absolutely brilliant or it could spectacularly go wrong with lots of kind of clashing and egos. I would hope that Postecoglou, being quite a good judge of characters, it's unlikely to be the latter. But it's Tottenham, so you never know.
Well, we'll see how it goes anyway. First pre-season friendly's just around the corner now. Just over 2
know.
weeks until you'll be at Tynecastle to watch Spurs in action against Hearts.
Yeah,
Then it's
and
QPR after that, and then the tour. New season's going to be here before you know it.
I know, and actually, I was just looking into some of those and like the accreditation, all that, and also I've got before that under 21s are playing at Enfield Town. That's kind of technically the season opener on I think it's the 13th of July that they're doing that. So first chance to see the new kit in action and see some of the kids kind of playing and seeing who's involved in that setup as well and which ones have been plucked into the first team pre-season kind of thoughts for the tour. You get quite a good inkling with that first under 21s training, first under 21s friendly, which players are unlikely to go off on the tour and which ones are probably going to go on it. And as you said, that's the other interesting aspect of that. I think with previously we thought, oh, there's going to be loads of youngsters involved with the first team this summer, but actually with the number that are now going to be involved because they're not at international tournaments or they've come away early from international tournaments or even just new signings, it probably is going to only limit the youngsters involved to the best of the best. They'll probably leave a little section of maybe 4 or 5 that they'll take with them. And you would imagine probably Mikey Moore and Tyrese Hall take 2 of those slots. Maybe Josh Keeley as a goalkeeper, they take as another young one. And then, you've got potentially 2 or 3 slots there for. We'll see what happens with Jamie Donnelly, whether he heads out on loan. Interest there. It looks like certainly Oxford United and Birmingham with Chris Davies are going to be interested as well. So there's what they do with a player like Jamie. In my thinking, I would probably send him out on loan. And I know people want to see him perform and play in the Europa League and all of that sort of stuff as well. But if you've got Lucas Bergvall there, who the Spurs are not going to, let's be honest, you don't bring him in and loan him straight out. It doesn't really work like that. Unless there's something happens behind the scenes, but he just feel he needs it. But I would think for Jamie, it's a good opportunity to go and get a regular season of football somewhere. Both of those clubs would be perfect for him. So yeah, I'm intrigued to see which ones kind of are given that opportunity. Will Lancashire is another one. Do you take Will Lancashire to give him a chance, or do you look at it and think, well, they're looking to bring in another striker. You've got Dane Scarlett, Troy Parrott's probably heading out the door, but you've got Richarlison will be there, should be fit. You've got Sonny will be there, should be fit. Does Will get a loan move as well? They're certainly not looking to sell him. Same with Jamie. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, that's probably a topic for future podcasts as we get closer to it. But that's almost as interesting to see which young players get the nod as the next crop, and they're probably going to be the ones you'll see used in the Europa League games as well for minutes later on in matches.
Yeah. Right. I think we'll call that a day for today's latest episode of Gold Guest Talk Tottenham. We'll be back later in the week, next
I would
week.
imagine so. I think there'll be enough happening this week, hopefully.
Yeah. So as ever, just keep with us at football.london for all your latest Tottenham news. If you go to nordvpn.com/goldguest, not only does our link give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan, but you'll also receive a Saley data voucher. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the podcast episode description box.